Transparent RX. The title of the webinar, you should be able to see there from your screen. If you cannot, kindly send me a message and let me know, and I'll see what I can do about it. Before I get started, I just want to share a little bit about myself with you because I think it's very important to be able to trust the source of the information that you're going to get today. And I encourage you, once we wrap up, go out and verify what I share with you. I got my start in the pharmaceutical industry 2 decades ago with Eli Lilly and Company as a pharmaceutical sales rep. I know the challenges that patients have getting access to the drugs that they need. I know what that costs because I pitched them. I was fortunate enough after what we called, quote unquote, carrying the bag to move into the corporate offices where I led. And by the way, that fortune came from persuading physicians to prescribe a brand drug over a generic drug, a new brand drug for type 2 diabetes at that time, Actos, over a proven generic drug. I moved into the corporate offices where I led a market access team in the diabetes care division, Actos, your insulins, Humalog, Humulin, Byetta later came on later. We were charged with getting our brand of drugs onto the PBMs formulary. By this time, I had caught the entrepreneurial bug, knew a little bit about pharmaceuticals and pharmacies, so I decided to start a mail order pharmacy. That was right around in the 2005, 2006, nationally licensed in all 50 states. By 2010, when biologics started to become the norm. This was before specialty pharmacies even existed. At that time, as a retail pharmacy, there was no such thing as limited distribution drug. Specialty drug makers couldn't get the product out the door fast enough. And so cashed out of that business for a couple of reasons. First, the frustration with being squeezed by pharmacy benefit managers and the take it or leave it reimbursement rates that they offered. And then also the drug wholesalers. Enter into those master agreements requiring certain purchases from them, requiring a certain percentage of all your purchases from them. You get into those agreements and then they jack up the prices because you had to buy a certain percentage of all your purchases from them. Otherwise, you ran afoul of the agreement. Decided if I can't beat them, join them. So from all that experience, that allowed me to pivot into owning a pharmacy benefit management company. And so what I've learned up to this point, I'm going to share it with you today as much as we can in 35 or 40 minutes. If you have any questions for me, there are 2 ways to get those questions to me. You can, everyone's on mute. You can send them to me via chat, or you can raise your hand and I will unmute you. Let's get into it. Okay, so you can't get away from it today. The bad actors are being called out, and I'd like to think we've had something to do with that. And so this isn't about us today. This is about radical transparency. This is about fiduciary standards. This is about doing what is best for the client and their employees' independence. All right, so by the end of this presentation, 3 things. I want you to know how PBMs make money. For goodness sakes, I want you to feel something other than indifference. If you're indifference, there's no fire in the belly. Without fire in the belly, you can't take the action that I'm going to be asking you to take. That's address the primary concern, which is pricing that employers have. But we're going to talk about today a solution to the pricing problem that doesn't directly involve tackling bigger discounts or getting bigger, larger rebate guarantees. It is about eliminating information asymmetry. Information asymmetry is an economic theory. It says this: when one party has access to information that another party doesn't have access to, the party with the information and the better skill set to interpret that information leverages that information to its financial advantage. That's what PBMs do. That's what PBMs do. They are leveraging information asymmetry. They want all the information, they have all the information, and they don't want to share it all. By not sharing it all, it allows them to get away with charging higher fees than they would be able to do if they shared the information. As a kid, it would be easier to sneak in your mom's purse and grab $5 or $10 if she didn't know how much she had in there in the first place. She wouldn't miss it. Employers don't know what they're missing because they don't know how much money is in the PBM's purse. If you knew, you would stop it. This is a prime example of information asymmetry at play. The PBMs aren't the only stakeholders involved in this information asymmetric process. Also, you can refer to it as information failure. This is a 30,000 uh, uh, employee group. It's an insurance carrier, and they entered into an agreement where they couldn't get access to their own information. This is an example of information success, the opposite of information failure. Every plan sponsor that is self-insured should get access to a receipt for rebate payments. Every employer, every union, every city, every school, every state should get access to a rebate remittance report. What's the point of rebates? What's the primary point of rebates? The primary point is to get to lowest net cost. How do we know what lowest net cost is at the claim level or at the NDC level if we don't know the amount of the rebate being paid or collected by the PBM for each drug that was eligible to be paid a rebate or refunded a rebate by a drug manufacturer? PBMs don't want their clients to have access to this level of detail, because then their clients would be able to hold them accountable, compare notes. Well, in Q1, we were paid a rebate on this drug. In Q3, we weren't paid a rebate on this drug. Why? Why are we not being paid a rebate on multi-source brand drugs? These are the types of questions that can be asked when you have this level of detail. So the status quo leads me to this, and it's getting more complex by the day. Even with newer legislation and Consolidated Appropriations Act and the FTC inquiry, I've not seen a change in the level of transparency being volunteered. Transparency has always had to be demanded by the purchaser. So PBMs typically, they want their clients to enter into an agreement that calls for artificially too low PBM administrative fees. You can see that here. Why? Because administrative fees, a full accounting can be provided easily. If it's per member per month, or if it's a per paid claim, that's easy to account for that. And so PBMs don't want their fees to come from the administrative fees because it's transparent. It's radically transparent. Instead, they say, you know what? We're not going to charge you any administrative fee, or we're going to charge you something that's artificially low. We can't pay the bills with it. We can't cover our overhead. We can't make a reasonable profit on it. So, we're going to make it artificially low. We're not going to charge you. But instead, when you accept that, then you give the PBM the green light to generate its service fee, or in other words, its management fee, how much is being paid to be the PBM, which is different than the plan cost. We're going to get to that here in a second. So they say, all right, give us $1 per paid claim. Give us $2.50 per paid claim. Heck, give us $3.50 per paid claim. And once you sign off on that, unknowingly, the purchaser of PBM services green lights the PBM generating its management fee primarily through these three buckets that you see here. We don't even have nearly enough time today to talk about all the different permutations in which PBMs generate revenue for themselves through those three buckets. It's not going to be called always manufacturer revenue or rebates in the contract. It won't be called retail markup in the contract. It won't be called spreads in the contract. PBMs are also saying today, and I'm seeing it a lot more, hey, forego a part of your retail rebates, or forego 100% of your retail rebates, and we'll give you a credit on your medical administrative fee. So on the pharmacy benefit, forego a portion or all of your rebates. We'll take those dollars and apply it then to your medical administrative fee, help you with cash flow and benefit from it right now instead of 9 months from that sort of thing. It's the same game. It's the same game. it's still a reduction of the administrative fee that allows the PBM to generate its service fee through hidden revenue streams. So that was one source. Here's a second source, says the same thing. Remember, I started in the industry 2 decades ago. So I remember small molecule brand drugs. Some of you remember when mail order, mandatory mail order, and then, any willing provider laws came around, and PBMs couldn't force the mail order on some groups. And then when that went away, the PBM shifted costs to specialty brand drug rebates, and now they've already specialty drug brand rebates started to decrease, and now they're focusing on something medical benefit drug claims. Those integrated PBMs and carriers, there's a reason that they shifted. And by the way, the American Medical Association wrote a real nice report on this recently, and really good job of not directly pointing the finger in how they were writing, but pointing the finger on this very topic. And so it may sound like I'm bashing PBMs. I'm one of a handful of folks that believe PBMs offer a valuable service. We just do. I own the pharmacy. PBMs and pharmacies and hospitals, they're just things. It's the people that make the difference. There are good PBMs, good actors, and then there's bad actors. But the business model works. We're bringing on a client that their PBM was a retail pharmacy, a local retail pharmacy. And you wouldn't believe, they were set up on a traditional model. You wouldn't believe the discounts that were so bad. They were keeping all the rebates. It's about the people. And so here are some of the hidden cash flows, and this is my issue, right? This is my issue. The hidden cash flows to PBMs that augment artificially too low PBM administrative fees. So I want you to understand the PBM business model. I'm going to talk about the contractual relationship and how the money moves. So as a PBM, we contract with pharmacies to have sites from which prescription drugs can be dispensed to our plan participants, and we have to have clients to provide those services to. Those plan participants come from third-party payers in the health plans. Third-party payers, unions, employers, small, medium, large, coalitions, health systems, municipalities. It's an exhaustive list of potential clients. And so when a prescription is dispensed, and I'm talking about the flow of cash now, when a prescription is dispensed, we reimburse those pharmacies based upon the contracted rate, the rate in which they've entered into a contract with us. We reimburse them based upon that contracted rate. And then we bill our clients for those same prescriptions. Not necessarily the same amount, but we bill them for those same prescriptions. Now, here, and by the way, if you didn't pick up on this, unless the PBM owns a pharmacy, we never control the product. if there, I mean, listen, you have, whether you like it or not, the, how do I say this? The ability of PBMs to leverage the information and the lack of sophistication of their clients to their financial benefit is remarkable. There's three problems here, and I'm just focusing on the right side of the screen here. There's three problems here. First, the inflow of cash from the third-party payer back to the PBM is too high. We talked about the retail markup. We talked about the mail markup, the spreads. It's too high. The second problem is the inflow of cash in the form of rebates. And again, it's not as simple as just rebates. It's not always called rebates. Sometimes it's called a product discount. Sometimes it's called an inflation program. Right? So just be mindful of that. Again, we don't have time to get into all that today. So the inflow of cash in the form of refunds or another rebates is too low. Because you saw two slides where the PBM is keeping a nice chunk of that for themselves. Now, I want to be clear here because I don't want you to leave here thinking this. Spreads, or in other words, retail markups or mail markups, aren't themselves inherently bad. Wait now. Rebate attrition or rebate spreads, in other words, the part of the refund coming from the drug maker back to the PBM that the PBM keeps for itself and doesn't pass on to its clients, themselves aren't inherently bad. What's bad is that the clients are clueless about the amounts being withheld by PBMs in the form of ingredient cost spreads and rebate spreads. That's what's bad. If a PBM decides we're going to make money off rebates and we're going to make money off ingredient cost spreads, and we're going to share that amount with you. If the employer, who's the client of the PBM, is okay with the amount being withheld by the PBM, that's transparency. That's transparency. But that is not what is happening. The PBMs are withholding this cash and refusing to provide the information necessary for some clients or a lot of clients to determine whether or not what they're withholding is fair. I had we had a project and we went out to a CPA firm and we took some bids from these CPA firms. And the CPA firm that I preferred to go with refused or was reluctant to provide a fee for the services we were asking them to perform. They just wanted to say, hey, we don't think it's going to go over this, but we don't want to provide a fee up front. Now, we know where that's going. It's the same things PBMs say. You sign the contract. Same thing PBMs say when the fees are exorbitant. Well, you sign the contract. I'm not. Plan sponsors shouldn't enter into any agreement where you don't know what you're paying the PBM. Now, I mentioned on this slide there were 3 problems, and I want to erase all of these markings so you see very clearly what the 3rd problem is. Look who sits at the very top of this system. The folks funding it. The companies funding it. The problem is the companies with the checkbook know the least about how this entire system functions. It doesn't matter if you've been a broker for 2 decades and you've done too many RFPs to count. If you have not immersed yourself in it, you are overmatched by the PBMs. Period. Now, relative to your peers, it may appear that you're doing well relative to your peers. That's misleading. I'm telling you from firsthand experience, having taught this stuff for 8 years now. That's not a knock. That's me going back to the 3 asks from up front to feel something other than indifference about what you learned today, so that you take some action. Get me fired up here. So we talked about the retail markup. We talked about the mail markup. It's referred to as the spread. The spread isn't a mistake. It isn't a billing error. It's intentional. The drug pricing standard, which forms the basis for discounted prices, everyone knows what it is. AWP, average wholesale price, or what some folks like to refer to as ain't what's paid. If a spread occurs, well, when a spread occurs, it predominantly occurs just in terms of volume with generic drugs. So generic drugs have primarily 2 prices. We can add in a third, NADAC and all that. I'm open to add. You can ask any questions about that via chat that you want. But primarily, we're focused on AWP and MAC. You can even throw in UNC if you want, but we're going to focus on the 2 big ones, AWP and MAC. AWP, like the sticker price on a car, no one pays it. MAC is more closely related to the cost the pharmacy pays to get the product on the shelf, but it too can be higher than the actual acquisition cost. So can NADAC. It can be higher than what the pharmacy actually pays to put the product on the shelf. At the end of the day, What matters most is how close, and let me erase this, hear me out. At the end of the day, what matters most, regardless of the price benchmark being used, and by benchmark, I'm saying AWP, I'm saying MAC, I'm saying UNC, I'm saying NADAC. What matters most is how close the amount being billed to the third party payer gets to the amount the PBM is reimbursing to the pharmacy. If the PBM isn't taking a spread, it doesn't matter what the benchmark is. Okay? If the PBM is not taking a spread, it doesn't matter what the benchmark is. At the end of the day, it's going to come out really, really close. So close that any difference will be statistically insignificant. All right, so let's take a look here really quickly at how spreads manifest. I'm going to run through this really fast. Now, so this is something we post on, well, we used to, we don't do it anymore, but levothyroxine here. Let's take a look at this product right here. Now, we talked about two price benchmarks, the two big ones, AWP, and we talked about MAC. And so an employer, for example, will negotiate with a PBM, and hopefully they're negotiating saying you can only use one price reporting service. You can't cherry pick, right? You can't bounce between Medispan and Meredith or IBM, formerly IBM Watson Health. You can't. You got to pick one. And so the AWP here is five. Let's call it 560. That's the AWP. The broker or consultant negotiates with the PBM for a generic effective rate, a discount off of all generics in which the PBM's contracts will perform. That generic effective rate that the PBM is willing to guarantee, and by I want to get into it so much, but let's just keep it simple. Let's say it's 85%. That would mean that the discount off of levothyroxine 100 microgram 30 tablets would be right around $475. That would leave a billed cost to the third party payer of $85. At an 85% discount effective rate or generic effective rate, when you get rid of all the reclassifications and the cost offsets, right, and taking advantage of zero balance due claims and changing, reclassifying single source generics as brands, when you get rid of all of that and you uncover all of that, you'd love an 85% if you could get it. You'd be over the moon at what it would do to your cost in terms of bringing it down. I say that to say there's lots of things that PBMs can do to artificially inflate their performance. It's facts. I just named three. Now, so the cost to the employer is $85. That cost, folks, is this reimbursement here. That cost is this reimbursement here. Now, the PBM still has to pay the pharmacies. The PBM still has to pay the pharmacies. Now, the pharmacy paid only $4 to put that product on its shelf. The pharmacy would be ecstatic if the PBM would give them 100% markup. Let's do that today. Let's give them 100% markup. Heck, let's even give them $2 dispensing fee. That makes the out-of-pocket cash outlay for the PBM only $10. That leaves folks a $75, you got it, spread. Well, Tyrone, we know that most generics are going to be on the MAC list. And you would be right. More about that later. But let's say that this product is on the MAC list. Let's say that the MAC price is $15. The PBM's cash outlay doesn't change. The contract is the contract with the pharmacies. That's it. The contract is the contract with the pharmacies. So it's still going to pay $10. The PBM now keeps a spread of $5. That's how spreads work. If a PBM says it's passed through, that's because the sales rep is telling you it's passed through, because they were told it's passed through. I'm telling you, if you can't get the information to verify what the pharmacy was paid, then the PBM ain't passed through. The PBM, in its own definition, is passing through only what they're contractually obligated to pass through. That definition is different than what you believed it to be, or your client. The state of Ohio, about 2.5, 3 years ago, I believe that they're getting close or just received some monies because of this. They sued, but they uncovered in just spread fees nearly $250 million between these two PBMs. Again, my issue isn't with the spreads. It's just that there's no accounting for it. That's the issue. The state of Ohio decided, finally, we're not going to focus on uh, uh, discount guarantees. We're not going to focus this time around on rebate guarantees, all that. We're not going to focus on that. We want to know how much you're making. And if Greg were here today, to a woman and to a man, he would say to you, it's not information they've never had before, which is true, because they never asked for it before. More importantly, they never demanded it before. If the state demands it, they're going to get it. They never did until then. And when they uncovered $250 million in just spreads in 1 year, not in 10 years, in 1 year, they terminated the contracts on the spot. They thought about it for a little while, maybe a week, and terminated the contracts. We're up against it because the state, once they learned, they wanted a new contract. Employers, it ain't so easy. because there's other stakeholders involved and other things involved in keeping multiple parties happy. I wish it were that easy. Misleading, hang in there with me I got less than 10 minutes. Hang in there with me. The best part is coming up. Misleading contract language. We talked about MAC pricing. We talked a little bit about rebates. From a contractual standpoint, and MAC list, the employer's MAC list is usually less comprehensive and less aggressive than the pharmacy's MAC list. That's right. The MAC list a PBM uses for the third party payer, its client, can be different from the MAC list the PBM uses to reimburse the pharmacy. So the MAC list can be different between the PBM and the client that determines the amount being billed to the client, and a different MAC list between the PBM and the pharmacy that determines what the PBM is going to reimburse the pharmacy. It creates spreads. It creates spreads. I talked about the renaming of rebates. You can see just 3 there. And it's about the contract. Contract language should say something like this. No disclaimers, right? Based upon the utilization of covered members, stuff like that. Get that stuff out of there. Because not all rebates are being paid to PBMs based upon utilization. Any and all monies received by the PBM from the manufacturer, including but not limited to, and then fill in the blanks. Clinical programs, market share, access, price protection, formulary, product discounts, administrative fees. All these are types, those administrative fees from the manufacturer are different than the administrative fees I talked about up front. That administrative fee I talked about up front, the artificially too low, is about the PBM service, 24/7 call center, an account manager, member web portal, electronic claims adjudication. That's that administrative fee. This administrative fee is different. Real quick, public information here, released by Express Scripts that sued Kaleo because Kaleo refused to pay rebates that Express Scripts believed that it owed. I got no doubt that Kaleo owed it. They probably didn't think Express Scripts would sue and make the information public. But here's what I want to share. And this information, by the way, came out 3 years after the fact. But here's what I want to share. Administrative fee that I just talked about dwarfs the formulary rebate. Price protection rebates, which say if a drug maker increases the price of a product, say above the inflation rate or whatever metric that is going to be used, and increases it rapidly, then the amount of the rebate being paid also increases. If those monies aren't addressed in your contract or your client's contract with the PBM, guess what? The PBM is going to keep it. Assume that the PBM is going to take advantage of any loophole. Price protection rebates, as you can see here, dwarf even the administrative fee rebates. from one manufacturer. These are outcomes based, and these are refunds. These are rebates. If the contract does not stipulate that the client is owed these monies, then assume that the PBM is going to take advantage of any loophole. In the case of Januvia, if a patient doesn't hit a certain glucose level, a certain A1C level, then there's a refund that's going to apply, either a portion of the original cost or 100% of the original cost, based upon the metrics agreed to between Merck and Cigna. It's a rebate. And so while there's more sophistication being attained by purchasers of PBM services, PBMs are always trying to stay 5-10 years ahead. So they knew years ago that rebates as they are today might completely go away. So what did they do? Formed rebate aggregator group purchasing organizations. So when we negotiate with manufacturers, the amount of money that they're going to refund, in other words, rebates, is finite. It's finite. And so now, instead of keeping a share of the quote unquote rebate dollars, now they can charge GPO, or what's called GMF, GPO management fees, to the drug makers, and they're no longer now rebates, but those dollars come from the same bucket of dollars in which rebates are paid. They're not in addition to, they come out of the same bucket of dollars. Just drove that, just drew that just in case you decide to, go out and do your own research. This is an exchange of information and ideas. That's all we're doing today. An exchange of information and ideas. There's some questions coming in. I'm going to get to those here in a second. I'm making pretty good time today, by the way, because I can easily go an hour and a half. Here's the bottom line. And I'm talking to employer groups. I'm talking to third-party payers. Here's the bottom line. And here's what the Consolidated Appropriations Act is trying to get to. And if you think it's a joke, that's a mistake. We've seen it with the 401k debacle. That's why PBMs are reluctant to accept the fiduciary standard, because it holds them accountable. CAA is putting more pressure, more responsibility on the PBM clients to hold the PBMs and their advisors accountable. Sleep easy at night by understanding when a PBM is hired, how much you're paying that PBM. If you know that, you're good. If you know that, you're good. If you don't, you have a problem. The amount the PBM is being paid is different than the plan's final cost. The amount that the PBM itself is being paid is actually hidden in your client's cost. The administrative fees, we know that's easy to calculate, but we're talking about those hidden revenue streams that are bad for customers. When the PBM makes money here, when the PBM makes money here, in a number of different ways that ultimately increase the final cost of the plan. You saw what happened to the state of Ohio. I didn't make it up. It's public information. That $223 million that they paid in spreads showed up here in the form of ingredient costs. But now that they've identified it, probably cut it at least in half, now the plan's costs have gone down. Because the state of Ohio understood they had to know this information. The CEO of CVS Health said this in a 2018 earnings call. I was just talking to my mom before this webinar, and we were just kind of laughing because as a kid, the two things stuck with me being raised by her. One, you can't always have what you want when you want it. The second thing was, don't chew with your mouth open. And like that stuck with me my entire life. I've even dated women who chewed with their mouth open, and I had to break up with them. It's true. And I'm sure they've broken up with me for reasons over the years too. But you get my point. The point I'm making is that now, after all these years, my mom chews with her mouth open, and it drives me nuts. Like you made a point of this when I was a kid, but now you do it. And she said, I need to get over it. Now, it's a little bit hypocritical, Mom. The CEO of CVS Health says one thing to customers and another thing to shareholders. It's hypocritical. In layman's terms, what he is saying here is we're going to make as much money as we possibly can. Underwrite contracts. The amount of money that we're going to make is going to depend on how sophisticated or unsophisticated our clients are. That's what that says. The amount of money PBMs make can be determined by this formula. The information that you need to calculate it, on the other hand, is much tougher to come by. Everything in green at some point lands in the PBM's bank account. An example of a cash disbursement would be a share of manufacturer revenue or rebates or manufacturer refunds that are paid to the PBM, that the PBM passes back to its client. That's a cash disbursement. A reimbursement to a pharmacy that dispenses a prescription to to a PBM's plan participant. That's a cash disbursement. Whatever is left over is the PBM's earnings after cash disbursements, or you could call it the PBM's management fee, or you could call it the PBM service fee. That's the number we've got to drive home if you want or even care about change. The new path says this. This is the ideal path. The PBM makes more money one way. They just can't say it. You just can't trust them. You've got to have the education and you've got to have the knowledge to make sure before you sign on that dotted line or your client signs on the dotted line that that's what's happening. PBM says we're pass through, we're fiduciary, we're transparent. What does the contract tell you? Page 1 of the contract, starting with the definitions, will tell you whether or not what's being told with you is true. To how you define it or how you interpret pass through to mean to you or your organization. Now, most PBMs won't sign a fiduciary standard contract. The next best thing is radical transparency. Again, the most important thing is if the PBM is making money here, here, or here, is to be able to have information to determine and calculate what that amounts to. You don't need a fiduciary standard to do that. What you do need is radical transparency. You can't have a fiduciary standard without radical transparency, but you can have radical transparency without a fiduciary standard. Results speak for themselves. First year, cost cut by 60%. The reason, the incumbent, you've seen it, the high quotes on the rebates and all, you've seen it. We talked about earnings after cash disbursements. Everyone knows the big PBMs get better deals than the boutique PBMs like mine. Everyone knows that. You've heard the story about the aircraft carriers, how long it takes them to turn. Same with big PBMs. While they have a higher buying power, no question about it, they've got to keep a lot of that for themselves to keep the lights on. Keep the lights on. You saw this CEO of CVS Health, what he said in the earnings call. The earnings after cash disbursement. If you believe Prime Therapeutics gets bigger rebates than we do and gets better contract rates with pharmacies, then at a minimum, you have to believe that they are paying themselves the difference between our PMPM and their PMPM, which essentially amounts to $35 PMPM. This is what everyone is upset about. This is why there's new laws that are circulating through Congress right now. Because their fee was higher than what the drugs cost. Think about that for a second. They were paying themselves more than what the drugs cost. In any other industry, if you can get that big of a markup and that, great. If if you do it in a transparent way. But sometimes, listen, I know nothing about automobiles. I know nothing about automobiles, and I'm going to skip because I'm going over here, but I know nothing about automobiles. Whenever I go in and get some work done, the best thing I can do is pretend that I know what I'm talking about. I can pretend. I can raise my voice, bang my fist on the table. I need this. I don't need that. And because of that, I might end up on the side of the road because I lack the knowledge. Or I didn't bring someone in with me who themselves is an expert. When it comes to pharmacy benefits management, don't be like me when it comes to automobiles. We've got the first and only certification with a focus on education that is helping plan sponsors become more sophisticated around their stewardship of pharmacy benefits management. And that is backed by a major university. The testimonials speak for themselves. Go out on the web, message people on LinkedIn, ask them what they learned. If you've got fire in the belly, at least take a look at it. I've got a few questions. That's my time today. Oh, and by the way, January 1st, 2023, the program is now backed by the University of North Carolina Eshelman School of Pharmacy, the #1 college of pharmacy in the country. And so Kentucky has been great to us for 6 years. We're moving in a new direction with the #1 school of pharmacy in the country. Okay, let me see what type of questions have come in here. How do I feel about integrating manufacturer patient assistance programs to maximize savings? Max them out. Here's what I can tell you. I could care less about the claim. If it's about the client, if it's about the member, the patient, if it's truly about that, I could care less about adjudicating the claim. I could care less about the rebates. We don't make money off of them anyway. We charge a per member per month fee. That's it. If the manufacturer is willing to ship the product for free, then leverage that. The one thing I will say is because there's no electronic utilization management programs being applied, your prior authorization, your drug utilization reviews. We use an MTM or medication therapy management program to replace that electronic verification process. I don't believe leverage these patient assistance programs for sure, for not just specialty, all brand drugs, but back that up because there's no claim now, right? If a PBM owns a pharmacy, they don't want that. They want the claim. In fact, bigger PBMs have contracts with manufacturers that they won't use these programs because of the rebates being paid to them. All this is talked about at the negotiating table. But if you use those programs, don't leave the patients alone out there on an island by themselves. I know they've got the doctor, but listen, there needs to be something in between that doctor and the pharmacy to help these patients, to make sure that there's no contraindications, that they're adherent, right? So back that up with some sort of program. Don't leave them out there alone on an island without some sort of program to provide some support for them. Importation of, what are my thoughts on importation of prescription drugs? Again, that's a gray area. Even some states, I believe, are getting involved. If cost has become an issue where there is a concern that an employer, for example, could even continue to pay for a pharmacy benefit or just an insurance program, period, a health insurance program, period. And if that is an avenue that will keep that program alive, then evaluate it and take a serious look at it. The only thing, again, I would say about that is tier 1 countries, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, drugs from there, and then back up that program with some sort of disease management or medication therapy managed program for the patient's benefit. Check references, maybe even do a site visit. Is it possible to capture savings rebates on drugs after the fact? I'm not sure what that means. Oh, so if you were given a set of a store, is it possible to determine how much savings should have been? It is very possible to do that. As a matter of fact, the tough part is, would a client be able to claw back that savings from the incumbent PBM? Right? And so it's going to boil down to the contract at the end of the day. So if that language is in the contract that allows the client to do that, then absolutely it can be done. But if that language is in the PBM's favor, then good luck. That's all I can tell you. And a lot of PBMs will, maybe you find on a $2 million spend, maybe you find $250,000 in potential savings, real savings, but the PBM in the contract has limited its exposure to 100K. And then even worse, maybe it takes 18 months, 2 years to recoup any money. I'm in favor of what's called continuous monitoring. Monitor the PBM every single month. You got certain metrics, quantitative and qualitative, that you're looking at every single month. That way you identify, as opposed to waiting 18 months, 24 months to do an audit, you find problems early, you fix them, and the financial damage has been limited. That's funny. Yeah, do that, Brenda, for sure. Okay, all right. That is my time. I appreciate your participation. Pass the word. Get your colleagues, get your peers on this webinar every month. We're just trying to help folks. All right, be safe.